Hi, this is Peter Woodbury once again with an episode of Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And today we have the honor of having Jan Watkins in our booth or through Skype, where we'll be talking to her about the emotional freedom technique, also known as EFT, and she'll be giving a training here in September. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation with her to learn more about this technique and how it can be useful practice and who might be interested and who might benefit from it. So stay tuned. Good, so I'd like to welcome Jan Watkins to our show. Jan, thanks for being part of the show today. I'm looking forward to...
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be talking to the Edgar Cayce people.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring some of this EFT, emotional freedom technique, and the connections to the Cayce work, and knowing you'll be here in the fall, in September, to teach a 4-day training. Mm-hmm. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, give us some of your background?
Sure. I've always been interested in self-help from the time that I can remember, so that's always running in the background. But initially I went to school for a business degree. I practiced a little bit as a CPA. I got an MBA. I went to law school. Then I stayed at home with my kids. And during that time, someone introduced me to EFT. This was in the almost 20 years ago now. I got a little flyer that said, here's this thing, and here's what you can clear. You can use it on insomnia, headaches, and several other things on the list. I didn't have any things on the list, but I kept the paper just in case something came up. So I eventually tried it and didn't quite believe it at first, but found emotional things shifting, especially for my kids. They were quite young at the time. And so I got the information that was available at the time, which was in DVD form by Gary Craig, who founded the technique. Learned it, was fascinated by it. I felt like it was magic, still do. Mm-hmm. After my kids got a little older and I was trying to decide what to do and where to go, I ended up at that point deciding that what I had the energy for was this type of work. So I just tried to decide whether I needed a clinical license, and I went ahead and decided to go back, get an MSW, so that I became a licensed clinical social worker, and have been using EFT before that, during that, and since that time with people for all sorts of issues to help reduce emotional reactivity.
So you kind of stumbled upon it. Yeah, and then kind of started applying it to yourself and saw the benefits and started working with it with your children, you said?
Yes.
And then what kind of uses did you find with yourself and with your children?
Well, the early and obvious things were if someone has a headache, or somebody's upset about something, or child comes home from school and they had a bad time on the playground and they're really upset, or they're afraid of a teacher. Simple things like that, simple emotional reactions. And when I saw that those worked and those shifted, and then I saw Gary Craig working with serious diseases. He worked people with significant diagnosis. And so one of his many mantras was try it on everything. And so I did that. I had a nephew with a phobia of swallowing a pill, so I used it on that. If somebody was having a relationship problem, I would try it on that. And so in the beginning days, I was sort of just looking for anybody that I could find to try it on, and had a lot of fun with it, great success with it, and just kept going. Yeah. And I've used it on many different issues at this point.
So how does it work, and what's the theory behind it?
Well, the basic premise is that if we have emotional reactivity, whether you're reacting to somebody cutting you off in traffic, or a slight from someone at work, or a significant other rolling their eyes, and you have an emotional reactivity, there's something in it for me to learn. There's some reason that it's bothering me. There's some programming that I have. For example, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy. Because if I didn't have that programming, I wouldn't have that reaction. I would be a little annoyed maybe, but it would pass. So when you find yourself fixated on some sort of emotional reactivity, that's an easy one, because sometimes people have trauma in their past, even pre-verbal trauma or PTSD that's gone dormant, and they're reacting and they don't really know why. So what we do is take any emotional reactivity and we simply tune into it like exposure therapy. And we use this simple tapping protocol of tapping on the endpoints of the body's meridian systems. And the body takes those two contradictory signals and accepts the calming signal and says, oh, I guess that's not a big deal anymore. And then along with that, in the background, you get a cognitive shift that says something like, maybe in the beginning, I'm not safe, and it switches to, oh, I am safe, I'm okay.
I see. So you get the person to think about whatever triggered them, whatever they made them angry. If you said with your child, if they had a experience with a bully or something in the playground, and then you start tapping on the meridian points.
It's the endpoints of the body's the 14 energy highways in the body. I'm not an expert in that work, but it ties in with old pictures we have from thousands of years ago of the acupuncture diagrams and the meridian systems. And these particular points, which aren't, they don't have to be followed precisely, but it's the endpoints of the acupuncture, of the meridian systems in the body.
And
so those are highly conductive, and it calms the body.
So
takes me out of fight or flight.
So the body is having mentally, you're kind of thinking about what was disturbing you, and then physically you're getting a calming response, and so slowly the calming response kind of overrides the disturbance. And do you bring the person down and then have them remember it again, and then bring them? Is it a series of
Exactly.
loops?
So we'll keep testing until it's gone. Sometimes it'll be gone after a couple of rounds of tapping. Sometimes it's a little more resistant, and then we just poke around and see why isn't it shifting quickly. And as you know, sometimes people have either a psychological block or some perceived gain of keeping a problem. So while they want to get rid of the problem, they sort of don't want to get rid of the problem. And so sometimes we have to explore that a little bit before something will shift. Good example of that is anger. So if I'm angry at person X and I feel sort of righteous in my anger, maybe I don't want to not be angry. So we have to explore that a little bit first. But if I have no block and I'm tuned into the anger and I'm tapping, the anger will just drift away. It's like energy draining out of the body.
Can you ever do it like while the stressor is actually happening?
That's the best time to do it. Because
so
you're tuned in.
Does your partner kind of wonder, like all of a sudden they're talking to you and you start going like this, and they're like, okay, what am I doing?
Most of the people in my circles know the tapping language, and so in our household now, it's very common to say, you need to tap on that, or I need to tap on that, because it becomes clearer what's your stuff and what's my stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I need to tap on that, but you need to stop doing that.
Yeah.
So it really, it's a lot about self-responsibility. It's a way of thinking in life that I'm not a victim to what's happening, but I have some self-responsibility and some power to deal with that.
Now, how many years ago did you first find out about it? Like, how long have you been kind of in this journey?
I was just doing the math yesterday because my 30-year-old daughter was about 12 or 13 at the time, and she was my first victim. We were away at a soccer tournament and she couldn't sleep. And I said, oh, goody, there's something on this paper that says insomnia, let's try it. So we tapped, she went to sleep, but I didn't pay much attention to it because it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, well, she was probably going to go to sleep anyway. So I kept trying it on little things like that and started to realize this is working.
So how would it work? Let's say you can't sleep, so you start thinking about all the reasons why you're struggling with sleeping. Like, I'm worried about my test tomorrow. So you have them think about that, and then at the same time they're tapping, and slowly there's this transfer to the peacefulness, and then the person falls asleep.
That's the quick shortcut way to do it. A lot of times when people have insomnia, they have a lot of things going on in their life. There's a lot of stress. So sometimes it actually, with insomnia, it's a persistent insomnia, it involves taking a look at a number of things in their life to try to pull those stress levels down. And then the sleep just comes naturally on its own. And then sometimes you can just tap on, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, and you'll go to sleep. So it just depends. We've all got many layers sometimes, and sometimes not so many layers to an issue.
It almost sounds like, I'm a hypnotherapist. It almost sounds like it's a confusion technique. Because one of the things with people that are difficult to hypnotize, you start having them hold kind of cognitive dissonance, two different thoughts. Like, they're thinking they can't sleep, at the same time they're doing something that's calming, and so it's almost like that. There has to be something that gives.
And that is sometimes an element that we introduce, is that cognitive dissonance by sometimes just tapping through just the opposites. I don't want to do it. I do want to do it. I can't sleep. I can sleep. And like you said, it brings about that dissonance. And then some of the untruth falls away and you end up with more clarity.
Yeah.
So we definitely introduce that into it as well. And I think maybe when you start the tapping, there could actually be a mild, lightly altered state when two people are working together. So while it's not hypnosis, it might have a tiny element of that focus.
A little trance-inducing or something like that. Yeah. Now, could you go give us an example of what your day might be like, and kind of maybe take us through any cases from beginning to end of treatment? Like, is this something that you work with somebody once, or is this something that maybe you have to work with them over several sessions?
All of the above and many more. Sometimes people will come for a particular issue and it'll take a session or two or three, and sometimes they come for months, and sometimes they come and go as different issues arise. I had a really exciting case recently with a gentleman who had a serious cancer diagnosis. And so obviously we got to sort of break apart what's going on there in terms of the emotional work. I'm obviously not involved with the physical, that's the medical profession, but my job is to see what, if anything, I could do to help him clear the emotional baggage in his body from the beginning of time. So we just started exploring. We had a couple of months to do that. And we started with, if we just started saying this cancer, this cancer, this cancer, that might start to open some things up and give us information, but that's just too global. It's not going to probably get us anywhere. Might bring the body down a tiny bit, but it's not going to release any major emotion. So what we did was we started with the emotional experience he was having at the moment, which was shock and trauma, that I might die. So we just simply started with that. My kids might be left without a father. And then anything that every week I would just check with him, what negative emotions do you have? Well, the medical person said this week, and that really made me angry. And then I feel like they're incompetent. So we worked through that. We also, in the course of this several weeks I worked with him, went back to the childhood incidents where he, even his birth experience, just from stories people had told him, something that happened when he was born. We went all the way through his early childhood, because as you know, but from 0 to 7, we're in those hypnotizable brain waves. We're more suggestible, so we form a lot of our early beliefs. So we went back to desensitize things that he still had an emotional reaction to as a child. Sometimes we remember a playground incident at age 5, and we can still feel that emotion in the body. So we cleared anything and everything that we could think of that was negative in his wife, relationships with his wife, things that had happened with his children. So over the course of several weeks, I'd say we maybe had 15 to 20 really specific targets. And when he called me, he was in great despair because he was looking at a very invasive surgery with 2 possibilities, one really bad and one even worse than the really bad one. So long story short, by the time they got in there to do the invasive procedure, they couldn't find, they did testing during the surgery, 8-hour surgery, they couldn't find any of the diseased cells in this particular organ that was going to be removed. So he also did other things. He did some meditation. He had a really positive attitude. So I can't say EFT cures cancer, but what I knew I could do was help him remove the emotional stress from his body so the body could return to a natural healing state.
So they had identified cancer cells in this organ, and then during the surgery, they were gone.
They kept testing them over the weeks that I worked with him. And then the surgeon would say, well, you know, I'm not really sure. Or now they look suspicious. Or I'm not going to call them cancer, but they look troublesome. And it started to change a little bit. And at the end, in the last week, the surgeon said, when we get in there, we're going to test as we go, and maybe we won't have to remove this organ.
Now one of the things, just kind of tying this to Edgar Cayce, one of the things he talks about is how every cell of our body has a consciousness. And so do you hypothesize that there's something about if you you work on changing your consciousness, that affects you on the cellular level, that you can have cellular changes as a result of this technique?
I think it absolutely does, and some of the current research, which you can find on the EFT Universe website, because I don't always follow the research, but one of the recent ones was about the downregulation of the genes, the inflammation genes. So there's a lot of very specific research now about the impact on the body. But the way I see it is that we run by a software program, which is our belief system.
Right.
And that once we change that belief system, it's an instant update.
Yes.
There doesn't even seem to be a lag time. So whether my belief system is about the health in my body, or my how I present myself in the world, there seems to be an instant update. He had a dream shortly before this surgery, which was very revealing in that this very powerful healing light was trying to get to him, but there was a block. And he really, really wanted it, but it stopped right before it got to him.
Yeah.
So we just used that metaphor and tapped on whatever that block might be.
Yeah.
The fear of getting better. So I believe that whatever our belief system is, which we seem to encode with emotional learning, dictates what happens to our body.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it happening, that if I believe this is going to happen, it's going to happen. If I believe and allow for a healthy state, I don't think the unhealthy state can exist in the body. And also, if I am not holding stress, then and Edgar Cayce actually called used the word poison with respect to anger, how it's actually poisoning the body.
Yeah.
So if we're eliminating all of that, we've got kind of a clean slate for the body to heal itself and to recycle.
Yeah, that dream is it's so universal in a way, because the work I do with faith, it's like heal thou my unbelief. It's almost that if you can accentuate faith, you can really heal things, but we all have some barrier, not me, or somehow, whatever that block is. And so it seems like in a way you're getting past the conscious barriers to try to get into the I don't know what if this system taps into the, whatever that unconscious nervous system is that kind of can activate and lead to healing. It sounds really fascinating.
We're also always being bombarded with messages, certainly by the medical profession, by commercials, especially by, cancer has been it's a powerful word with a lot of energy around it now. And so my thought was, rather than the positive thinking, which was more back in the 70s and 80s, just say a good positive affirmation and you'll be fine, or, you can create your life. But if you say a positive affirmation, like I am in perfect health, then what comes up is like, no, you're not. There's some negative thing in the background. So what we're doing is jumping in, finding the negatives and seeing if we can clear out. So we have a fear to removing the barriers to healing, because I don't want to get my hopes up, for example, is a belief people have, or, I don't really want to believe because then I'll be crushed if it doesn't work out.
Right. Well,
so if we can just address
something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we just tune into false hope. What will it feel like if you're devastated? And then it starts to lose its power. And then the healing can come in and there's no barrier.
Yeah.
So that's a profound example of healing something.
I had read recently that it was a question they were asking, what's the best predictor of longevity at the diagnosis of cancer? And the answer was what the doctor tells the patient. That if the doctor says you've got a year to live, that becomes the best predictor of how long that person's going to live. Because in some ways the doctor comes in, there's so much faith or belief put on that person, and then they accept that suggestion, and then it fulfills itself. So it sounds like you're helping people kind of undo this kind of programming, and kind of like you're saying, download a new program and kind of like, no, you can heal the cancer, you can be well, you can learn whatever it has to teach you and move on.
And the problem is that without some way to deal with the emotional impact, it's hard to convince myself I'm going to be okay, even though the doctor gave me a year.
Yeah.
Because when he said you've got a year, I had a shock response.
Yes.
So if I just go back and repeat that over and over, he said I only have a year to live, he said I only have a year to live, he said I only have a year to live, and I take the shock away, then my left brain can come online and say, well, that's nuts. There are a lot of possibilities.
Right.
But I can't access the prefrontal cortex while I'm in fight or flight.
Yes.
With the shock of what he said.
Oh, nice. And so tell me a little bit more about this course. So you're coming here for 4 days, and I think you said you're teaching, there's level 1 and level 2, and people can sign up for the level 1 or just the level 2 or both if they want to.
They can sign up for the level 1 and 2. They can do just the 1. They can do the level 2
if they've had the 1.
If they've had a level 1 with the EFT Universe training. The 1 is an introduction. It talks about how EFT evolved. It's a full immersion into how we believe that it works. There's a reference to the science behind it, but most importantly, in the morning and afternoon of each day, there's a chance to break off in groups of 2 or 3 and practice it yourself. So very specific exercises where people get a chance, and then we can go over what worked, what didn't, and how that felt. So people, my goal is that when they leave, they feel confident that they can use this at least on themselves, their friends, and their family, and hopefully for professionals in their practice. And I find that that is the case. People feel pretty good about it. It's not like I had a training this weekend. It's not rocket science.
Right.
It's really, in essence, what I said, we're having an element of exposure therapy and then some kind of a relaxation response, and probably ties in a little bit to what, the hypnosis work. I'm just trying to allow for a shift, and I've got to calm down to do that.
Yeah.
So we'll do, we have 8 modules for the first training, 8 modules for the second training, and plenty of time for questions and practice and a demo or 2 here and there.
And tell us again when the course is. What are the
It's on
days?
September 14th through the 17th.
14th through 17th. So is that like a Thursday through a Sunday?
Yes.
Okay. And is it, will CEUs be offered, do you know?
CEUs will be offered. There's an extra $50 charge. They're IAHB CEs, which apply to even medical doctors can get those CEs. So it's a high level CE that works for most professions. I haven't found a profession yet that it doesn't work for. So there are 14 CEs for the first level and 12 for the second.
Oh. Now, are there any other examples or any other stories you'd like to share with us, Beth, maybe about how EFT has changed your life or how you've seen it change the life of your clients?
I see it change and impact almost everybody that uses it for something, whether it's in a workshop or in my family or with clients. Mm-hmm. And I'm always amazed to see how that works out. I had one client came several years ago. I've worked with her on and off, and she had persistent back pain. And she said, I've learned tapping. I've been tapping every day on back pain. And I said, well, we've got to get a little more specific than that. Mm. So an example with what we do with tapping is, when did you first have the pain? And she said, well, it was 19 whatever. And was anything going on around that time in your life? Right? Not related to falling in your back, but emotionally, what were you experiencing? Yes. And she said, well, that was the year, after many years of a difficult marriage, that I decided that I was going to stay in the marriage. Mm. And so since that time, her back has been reactive to difficulties that she has with the husband. Mm. So what we did then is go to work with the relationship. It's been a very difficult relationship with her. Very much a struggle, but as you know, any personal relationship we have that's a struggle is an opportunity for growth as well. Mm-hmm. So we worked on some of the issues around her responses and her heartbreak around issues in the relationship. Yeah. And she still sees a chiropractor and occasionally has adjustments, but he's taught her how to take care of her back and prevent it from slipping out, which was the problem she reported to me. Last night, actually, I shouldn't give too many personal details, but she's in the marriage now and happy she made that decision and has a way to deal with her back. Yeah.
Yeah, so often I find that a physical condition or even a disease comes in some ways as a wake-up call. You know, a lot of clients that are just unhappy, that they're feeling trapped in a relationship. Oftentimes, yes. I had one client that actually, she got cancer. And then she realized, I don't want to live the last years of my life in this situation. And it was the motivation to do a lot of work like you're talking about. And now she's been cancer-free, I think about 8 or 9 years, in a new, healthier relationship. It was really a motivator. So I think a lot of times there's that psychological element. You know, it's almost like the body is responding to either the depression or the sadness or the fear. And it sounds like this technique is really helpful with people to kind of break that, before it gets too late.
Exactly. Some other lighter examples, I'm giving the heavy physical examples, but even just simple things. I had well, not so simple if you're a parent, but parenting issues. I had a mother come to me. She brought the whole family in, mom, dad, grandmother, grandfather, and the 18-month-old baby. And she said, I want to learn tapping. I brought everybody in. And so I told her about it, gave her some examples, but she had already written me that this 18-month-old was a terror when they had to get in the car seat.
Mm-hmm.
And he would not get in. He would scream, and they would often be waiting for up to an hour before they could go anywhere because he wouldn't get in the car seat. So he was 18 months old, not talking. He was in the office, sitting on one of their laps or walking around the office as we tapped. And I said, let's just play around with this. So I started tapping as if I were the 18-month-old. And I said, I really don't like my car seat. I don't like it when they strap the belt on me. I don't know when I'm going to get out. It's uncomfortable. And a couple of times he would just look over at me like, who is that person and what is she doing? Mm-hmm. Just using some of the things that we know is that we're all connected universally. Mm-hmm. And there's a consciousness that the baby has. Mm-hmm. And so she emailed me the next day and said, I don't know what you did, but she said the car seat thing is gone, which she later confirmed had stayed that way. But she wrote me a couple weeks later and said, no problem with the car seat still, but now I want to talk about him putting sand on other kids on the playground. So it's a way that we can deal with distressing things, with problems that the children are having, with problems with parenting. It works very quickly with children. So first, as a parent, I'll tap on my emotional response to what's going on with the child. And then if there's anything left, because the children are feeding off of the parents, mm-hmm. then we'll talk and tap about what's going on with the child. The child can participate or not participate, and shifts will happen very easily, very simple. One more quick example. I love this one. I had an 11-year-old once came with, he had been diagnosed with ADHD. And so people will often say, do you work with this diagnosis, that diagnosis, this diagnosis? Mm-hmm. And I say, well, let's try. Because a diagnosis is just a bunch of things you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So the little boy came in. I said, what do you want to work on? He said, I have a memory problem. He was having trouble answering the questions in the back of the social studies book after they did went through the chapter with his mother after school. So we tapped on it, and all I did was lead him in tapping and have him express what he was experiencing. I don't want to do this. I don't like the teacher. I don't like the book. I don't like having to stay inside. This kid had been on the psychiatrist had tried 7 medications to get him to be able to do social studies better. She emailed me later and said, he brought his social studies book home. He didn't forget it. He came in, he sat down, he did his social studies. She said, is this normal? Wow. She was actually kind of worried. So it can just sometimes break a negative emotional cycle that people get into. I'm not smart, or I don't want to do it. Lots of fun things.
So with just the previous case you talked about with the child that had a bad reaction didn't like the car seat. Were you tapping on the child, or was there was no tapping involved?
No. You could do that. What was going on that day is we were all tapping. So, I mean, I don't know the science behind the mirror neurons, but if I'm doing something, it might be lighting up something in your brain too. So it's possible it's that, or it's the connection the mother has with the child. Can't explain every piece of why it works, but it seems to be, there seem to be a lot of different ways that you can do it and reach people. Some people will sit at home and tap surrogately, so to speak, on someone else and notice the other person has good results.
Now, is it, do you ever tap someone else, or it's always either that person has to decide?
Good question. Gary Craig, when he originally did it, you'd see him in his DVDs, he would tap on people. Mm-hmm. Some people aren't comfortable doing that. Mostly in my practice, I'm tapping and the client is tapping, so we're sitting here doing this as we're talking. But if someone starts to have a difficulty, or they're tuning into an emotion and I don't want them to lose that, and this can be distracting, I'll say, is it okay if I tap on you? And I might just lightly tap on a point or on their fingers as they're processing the emotion. And people tend to like that. But generally, people are tapping on themselves. And that also trains them to do that when they go home. People learn to, when they get in a stressful situation, just start tapping.
And about how long does a session last? Like if someone's coming in for an EFT session?
I do a regular 1-hour session. So I might cover one issue during that hour or a couple of issues, or we might just get something started and set up and not quite finish. And so we'll kind of tidy it up before we leave.
So you do as much as you can, or much as makes sense in an hour.
And I actually try not to book hour to hour like a lot of therapists need to do. I leave myself an hour and a half. So if I'm in the middle of something, I like to have the opportunity to keep going. So sometimes I'll go over 70, 75 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But they get tired after that. So it's a good length to quit.
Now, are there any times where you would think that tapping is not recommended or useful?
Good question. I haven't found that to be the case.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's, you know, it's not invasive. There's no negative effects. So it's either going to be helpful or neutral. It doesn't seem like it's going to.
Some of the times where there's a little bit of a slow process, if someone is not emotional at all and they've had early situations that cause them to be a little shut down, it's a little trickier because they don't have. Some clients actually don't have that positive script to switch over to. So I have someone I'm working with right now where he truly, because of his upbringing, doesn't know what he deserves. You know, so I've got to. It doesn't always shift over when I tap with him, and sometimes it's harder to get him to an emotional state. But nonetheless, significant things are happening, even though we're tapping, and he isn't always tapping into an emotion. So I really haven't seen it cause a negative. And I could, you know, sometimes things just happen in different ways. And sometimes I'll think maybe something didn't happen, and I'll hear from the person a year later that their life changed, they got out of that bad relationship, they're married with a new dog and a new car. So you don't always know what form healing takes. I did notice in the reading that Edgar Cayce said that, what did he say? There were two things he said about healing, that all healing comes from the infinite. So, you know, it's a contract really between your soul and God. So I can't do that, or, but if there's a timing for that, it could be now or next week or next month. So we don't really know. But I haven't seen a negative. So for me, that's enough of a information to just keep going forward with it.
Yes, I think what Cayce talks about is that we that illness is caused by kind of falling out of alignment with kind of the God, oneness, infinite consciousness. It's almost like, and healing is kind of like a chiropractic adjustment to kind of get us back aligned. And I think, like you would say, fear and anger, all these kind of ego, kind of toxic emotions. Not, you know, anger can have a usefulness, but it's almost like this kind of, which seems like it's trying to get you back into spiritual alignment.
Exactly. It pulls you away from, it feels you away from, I like to think of it as truth sometimes when I talk to people. It makes you believe things that aren't really true, like I'm unsafe or I'm not good or I'm bad. And so by clearing the negative emotions, we do get back into alignment where we have a natural, I think, proclivity to heal, to be whole.
So it must be, go ahead.
He also had said, I was looking up what he said about healing. At the same time, he said each person must take responsibility for their own healing process. And that's what I like about EFT, is because we're taking responsibility for what's our part, what's our reactivity, what can we do?
Yes. Yeah, I think that Cayce's work is really, that it doesn't just fall out of the sky, that we have to engage it, that we have to engage with God or healing resources. So this must be very rewarding. It sounds like you've had it's had a profound influence on yourself personally and on your children, your family, and then it must be rewarding seeing how it helps. It sounds like it helps a lot of people.
It's very rewarding, and I feel the biggest part of it is that it's not me doing it, it's me showing them how they can do it. So they don't need to come back to me. They just need to know that they can do it, and just simply by feeling what they're reacting to and then calming themselves. It's very natural. Now,
could you walk us through, let's say, like a first session? Let's say somebody comes to see you and they say, well, you know, you helped my friend and they said I should come see you. I don't really know what tapping is. How would you explain it? How would you take them through kind of a introductory experience?
Okay. Well, I would say let's set the goals that you're looking to reach. So they might come in and say, I have a bad relationship, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't like my job. I don't like my career. So then we're going to try to set some targets for what I have dominion over, and that's going to be that I feel at peace with the fact that my child chose not to go to college, something like that. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
set the goals, and the goals are generally some sort of a feeling state that I'm not at right now, but I would choose to be there. So what we're going to do is find out where are we heading. It's like putting the destination in the GPS,
Mm-hmm.
and then what's in the way of that. And usually it's some kind of an emotional situation, or I have anger at that person, or I don't trust that person, or I'm terrified my child will never succeed.
Uh-huh.
And then that's where we use the tappings, because if I can't get to that feeling state I choose, which is bliss, joy, love, etc., there's some negative emotion in the way. And so we're just noticing them, and we just tick them off one at a time. And usually the negative emotional list is, for most of us, it's a big list. It goes back to childhood. And if we can get some of those early childhood events, those traumas or the learning that we got from 0 to 7 seem to keep repeating. So if we can get some of those early ones, it'll usually update. So we'll set the goals, we'll find the targets, and we'll simply start working on them. And they can work at home as well.
And then in the first session, will you do some tapping, or sometimes yes, sometimes no?
I usually will, and I often will have people tap as they're talking, because as people start to tell the story, which they've told a lot of times, they get emotional reactions sometimes. So we get benefit just by picking some point to do some calming tapping while they're talking, and that'll start to take the edge off of some of the things they're dealing with.
And do you give them a diagram of where to tap? Like do they just like?
I do. I have little cards, that have the diagram if they need it, but usually after 1 or 2 times they've got
They
it.
kind of know how
and
many points are there in the body?
There are 14 endpoints of the acupuncture meridians, but we throw in some extra points because a few meridians go across the head. So people have added this one. A couple of points go across the wrist, so we throw that one in. But it's okay to miss them or to add some. It's not really that picky. You can do it in a natural way, and you might just stay on one point if that feels comfortable.
So in a way, they're tuning into their own physiological response.
Exactly.
And then you give them homework. They're in between sessions. They're practicing this, and they come and give you feedback.
I don't always give them homework because people feel bad when they don't do homework. Right. So if they ask for it, I give it to them. I do sometimes give clients a list of the positives. With EFT, we're always focusing on the negative. But when they're home alone, I sometimes will give them 2 or 3 statements on the positive. So it's kind of a reminder, like my choice is to be at peace in this relationship. Mm-hmm. I'm a good person. I have choice. I have control over my life. So I might give them a few. If they ask for homework,
So are they encouraged to practice in between sessions?
Yes, they're encouraged to notice any emotional reactivity they have whatsoever, whether it's to traffic or to the television or the news or the weather. Any emotional reaction that they have is information that there's something not quite perfect yet.
Now, who do you think would benefit from taking the course? I mean, at the A.R.E. we kind of have massage therapists and Reiki practitioners and energy workers and hypnotherapists and kind of different folks. I guess within the New Age community, but kind of some of them have licenses, some don't. Do you think that it's a nice ancillary service to add to almost any of those practices?
I believe that it is. I personally couldn't imagine not having tapping as a personal tool. I've had doctors, I've had surgeons, all the people you listed in other professions, lawyers, and people come with an openness about how they can add it to what they're already doing. It fits in nicely with anything, even massage therapists. They might do a little tapping before or after they get on the table. Even doctors, sometimes doctors now, I read a recent thing where a doctor will have the client start to tap before he gives the diagnosis, which is a good idea. But I would have a hard time imagining someone that wouldn't benefit. Parents, anyone in a relationship, because relationships are sometimes really painful that people are going through and don't know how to get out of a cycle in a relationship. But if we simply add the tapping and we're having a conversation and I just tell you how I feel and you tell me how you feel and I start to desensitize it, then I can break that pattern where in relationships sometimes the wife is triggering the son's mother issues and the son's triggering the wife's issues. You know what I mean? So we can start to break those very quickly.
Yeah.
We can start to break some of that old patterning without a lot of words and analysis. We don't even have to know what's happening.
Yeah.
We can just feel, when you look at me that way, I just shut down, and I can just feel what that feels like to feel shut down or angry. It's very quick to have a shift happen.
Now, is there much? Has there been much research on this technique to show? Is it research based to some degree?
It is actually completely research based at this point. At the EFT Universe website on the left, there's a click for a tab for research, and there's I don't know, maybe 30, 40 pages of research listed there, links to other research. It's specifically been it has met the APA evidence-based requirements. I don't know if anybody's given it that blessing, but the requirements are listed there, and the information showing that they're met. Specifically been validated for anxiety, depression, PTSD, and phobias. But you'll see on that research website studies and papers and meta-analysis of areas that it's been used that I guess maybe span back about 20 years now, the research on that.
Oh, good.
A lot of new research, too, on the again, some of the brainwave impact and cortisol levels going down.
Oh.
There's quite a bit of research on it at this point.
Oh, good. We have a health center and spa here at the A.R.E., the Cayce Center, and I don't know if they offer. I would imagine they do, but it just seems like it would be a real nice resource. I mean, we offer, massages and different types of treatments, and I wonder if they offer that there.
I haven't been there, but when I was there, I didn't see it. But this would be a great addition to the services offered.
Yeah, and so this will be your first time teaching here.
Teaching there. I've been there many times, though.
Oh, good. Tell us a little bit about your Cayce connection. Just kind of when did you learn about Edgar Cayce, and how do you've mentioned some ways that these that EFT and Cayce's readings might weave together.
Well, I did. I think back in the olden days before the internet, we found information by going to bookstores. And I imagine I found him first in a bookstore and then contacted the A.R.E. when I wanted to find out about sensitivity in children. I read everything I could get my hands on at the time. So he was kind of my introduction to the metaphysical world. And I think I read, I think Mark Thurston had some books out, Your Soul, and whatever else was Akashic Records. I read anything I get, I devoured it at the time. And I just felt really connected to Edgar Cayce in particular because of the integrity that he had around his work and his spiritual principles and how he just tried to do what was right, and just learned a lot from the readings. And it just opened up a whole new world to me. Everything metaphysical. And so I just continued down that path, taking a lot of energy trainings, reading all kinds of books, which is probably why I was at a holistic doctor's at the time, who gave me the handout on the EFT. So I've been very fond of the EFT Center and Edgar Cayce and his books, and I love the reading There Is a River, the biography.
Oh, good. Well, I hope you have some time. Have you been to the Cayce A.R.E. before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. So you know your way around. Now, you've answered the questions that I had about this technique. I feel like I've learned a lot. I'm going to look at my calendar. I might pop up in the audience.
Good.
But is there anything that we haven't covered? Anything that you think would be useful for folks to know about?
Well, I just want to encourage anybody and everybody to consider attending. You don't have to be a mental health professional, and a lot of times people feel like I don't have enough training, or I'm not a therapist, but this is for everyone. It's for everyone to use in their personal lives and their professional lives. So you don't need to know anything. You can come right in off the street. One thing I guess I would say is that the training is not to do any heavy duty healing or curing there in the session. That wouldn't be an appropriate forum for that. So while we work on issues, we try not to delve into serious traumas, et cetera. It's just supposed to be an experiential training.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes people think maybe they'll come and they'll heal a lifelong issue, and they might,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not really intended for serious, heavy-duty healing sessions.
Yes.
But there is an experiential component. So I would just encourage everybody to come, and if for some reason the date conflicts, please find a simple book on EFT. There's actually a download at the EFTUniverse.com, a free 60-page manual that they can download and print out and learn. A lot of YouTube videos with people showing you how to do it. So it's very simple. It's user-friendly. You can't do it wrong. I would just encourage people to definitely learn about it if they haven't already.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Hope I get to meet you when you're down here next.
Good. I look forward to
September.
that. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So welcome once again. Here we are with the thought for the day. And let's hear from Pat Belisle, who's going to share the thought for the day. Hey, Pat, how are you doing?
Good, Peter. Thank you. We have a long thought for the day today, so I'm just going to jump right into it. This one is reading number 954-1, and it says, "By budgeting the time in all things, this is well. While your life, your experiences are orderly in part, if there are the regular periods given for the work, the play, the recreation, the entertainment, the activities, in all the various phases of necessary experiences, these will find their place in the experience." So, man, good thing I got right to that. I was trying to budget my time. I actually could be better at that in my own life. I find myself getting too focused on one thing or another, but I like that. It's a good reminder to all of us to find some balance and make time for those things that are important in your life. Are you good at that?
Yes, I think that. Oh, am I good at that? I'm thinking of the thought for the day. This is like the thought for my last 15 years. And I think that you probably feel the same way. I think that part of being part of this work is that I think it's so inspiring that there's this tendency to overwork. And I recall Edgar Cayce's overworking, and I remember there was a reading that said that he could live to be at least 100, but
Wow.
He would get unbalanced with giving too many readings and prioritizing, losing balance. So this is a nice reminder, because I'm trying to get back into balance. I just think of it like that: 8 hours for sleep and 8 hours for work and 8 hours for the fun stuff. And I think as a culture, we're losing track of that. So it's a nice reminder to keep things in balance, and there's a time and place for all things.
It's true. I think about Edgar Cayce's day, and somehow it just feels like it might have been easier back then, before they had the internet or hour-long commute or whatever else. Maybe I'm making
channels.
that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we're making excuses, but it did seem easier back then. But it's a good reminder for us today.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pat.
You bet.